Hey everyone. So what I want to talk about today is I want to talk about the idea of edging and whether or not edging is a tantra thing. And I'll say in fact, I'll save you time watching this video. Is in my opinion, it is not. However, I'm not saying it's a useless technique or a practice, but it has its pitfalls. There's some major pitfalls with edging. So I got in this discussion actually not too long ago with a guy who was all into this. This was like his thing, and he was very convinced that it led him to a more powerful orgasm, which, sure, yeah, that totally makes sense. I mean, if you're building up the sexual energy and you keep building and building and building and backing off and building and backing off and building and backing off, yeah, it's going to lead to a more profound experience. However, there are a lot of side effects, and I'll get to that in a moment. So first off, let me go ahead and describe to you what is meant by the word edging. So what is meant by the word edging is this idea that, so a man is masturbating, and I guess it could happen during sex too, although I think generally speaking, it's in reference to masturbation. So the idea here is that if you have to keep in mind a scale of 1 to 10. 1 is that you're flaccid. There's nothing happening. And a 10 is, boom, you're done. So the ejaculation occurred. So the idea here is you have to kind of know where your edge is in order to pull back. Because I'll tell you what, when you hit that 7 on a scale of 1 to 10, that 10 comes really quick. It could be like 10 seconds, 15 seconds after that point. So I usually tell men, hey, if you are training yourself through edging, you got to know where that point is. And this also applies like during a sexual experience. If you can keep in the back of your mind that, hey, I'm at a 7, let me slow down a little bit. Let me pull back a little bit my efforts. And that way it allows the energy to kind of settle back down, and then you can go back into it. So the purpose of edging really is just to discover that edge. However, men get addicted to this, right? Men get addicted to horny is high. It is a drug, right? So, and it has all the sort of similar chemical cascades, dopamine drops and everything else that are associated with drug use. And most of us guys, we get addicted to it because it's like, hey, we got this drug right in our pants. So the reality is that this practice of edging, although like I said, as I explained, it has that one benefit of like helping a man become familiar. One of the issues is if you are indeed interested in having sex for long periods of time, and if you are indeed interested in tantric experiences, sacred sexual practices, etc., edging is not the way to go. That's only to teach you where your edge is, because it causes too much heat. It causes too much irritation. It agitates the mind. It agitates one's breath pattern. It agitates the genitalia itself. So let's say you're prone to herpes. It's going to agitate it will potentially bring on an outbreak of herpes just because of all the abrasion. So there's a lot of side effects here that I think are actually rather negative, but dudes get addicted to doing this. And yes, it can lead to strong orgasm, etc., but I'll tell you what, the orgasm you get from edging is nowhere near, not even remotely close to as intense as what you can get from a connected, deep sexual experience. And what do I mean by connected? I mean by you're connected with your partner. You're making eye contact, etc., Now, let me go ahead and describe to you a scenario where, hey, this person has been practicing edging all week. They've even refrained from ejaculation, let's say. Okay, so best case scenario, this person's practiced edging all week. They've refrained from ejaculation, but they've been edging, and here's one of the pitfalls, is most of the time when guys are edging, they're doing what? They're looking at porn. Okay, and I know you guys out there doing this, right? So don't sit there and go, oh, I don't look at porn. Yeah, you do. And or you're in fantasy or whatever it is. Now, here's the problem with that. The problem with that is that pornography and fantasy and kink and sort of mental fixations are existing outside of the physical body. So in theory, if you have an orgasm while you're looking at porn or in fantasy or thinking about some sort of kinky sexual practice, although it amplifies the experience in a way, because what? You get really heated from it, right? You start thinking about some naughty thing you're really into, you get heated, and that's great. You know, you can drive it to your edge, right? And then you got to pull back. So here's the issue though. If you have an orgasm while in that space, all the energy goes out. It goes outside. Why? Because again, porn is outside the body. And again, fantasy, kink, etc., are outside the body. And the individual, in order to have experience what I would consider a tantric, an orgasm that's brought on by sort of the sacred sexual practice or a tantric experience, the individual needs to be centered. I've put up a lot of videos on this channel that are related to centering. And also I've put up, I believe one of the videos I put up was on the Mahabandha, which is called the Great Lock. And I think I put up the version that I utilize personally during a sexual experience, which can be applied at the moment of orgasm in order to bring yourself to center in order to generate the strong orgasm. So going back to my scenario, person's, you know, engaged in a sexual experience. They've been prepping themselves all week by building themselves up. The problem is then they're going into the sexual experience overheated. So, and again, in theory, this probably doesn't apply to all men, but it definitely applies to a lot of men, particularly the men, and I'm saying this specifically for the guys who tend towards premature ejaculation, or I shouldn't even use the word premature, but men who are ejaculating before they would like. Okay, so if you're heating yourself up for the entire week through fantasy, through pornography, through building an edge, which is incredibly addictive. I know, I've kind of like played with these things myself, I know. So when it comes in time to go into the sexual experience itself, you're going to be fighting that edge the entire time, which is annoying. Why? Because it prevents you from connecting to your partner, right? Because you're constantly worried about your own genitalia. It defeats the purpose of having a connected sexual experience. And again, it's kind of like you want to be able to go into a sexual experience cool. And that doesn't mean you're not turned on. That's not what I'm suggesting. It means turned on, but you're not in your head, right? If you're fighting off orgasm the whole time, you're in your head. You're like, you know, paying attention to what your body is doing. You're trying to relax your asshole or whatever it is. You're doing all these things. And so and again, the end result is you're not connected. You're not present. You're not present with your partner. You're not present with yourself. You're just like overly engaged trying to prevent something from happening, which to me is lame sex. So, so that like I said, that's the primary pitfall is that. And like I said, I mentioned there's these sort of sore, your genitals can get sore, you can develop blue balls, all these different other sort of side effects. And I also think that it's kind of a bad practice for your prostate gland because you're essentially agitating a lot of heat down there. And if you think about the idea of prostate issues, oftentimes they talk about what? Inflammation. Inflammation is the presence of heat. The presence of heat, and again, I'm taking this from a Chinese medicine perspective or an Ayurveda perspective, the presence of heat implies an agitation or an irritation. So if you're constantly down there rubbing it up and sort of, you know, building and building and building and building and teasing yourself, you're going to agitate that gland. And that gland will become swollen, again, because of the presence of heat and friction. Again, it's just a thought. And it's one of the reasons why, for instance, that certain studies say that when a man ejaculates, I think it's like 4 times a week, he will reduce the chance of prostate cancer, et cetera, et cetera. I would suggest that anyone ever, not that these people are ever going to watch this video, but you know, a good study would be as opposed to normal dudes who are you know, masturbating 3, 4, 5 times a week, because that's what that study was. It was dudes who are rubbing them out all the time versus people who are basically non-sexual. And they found that the people who were rubbing them out all the time had less incidence of prostate cancer, which I could see that because they're releasing the heat, right? They're releasing the energy. But again, from a tantric perspective, that's not desirable. It's not desirable to constantly be depleting yourself. So the idea here is that what I would do as a study, for instance, would be have a study where you teach a bunch of individuals, like let's say sexual transmutation practices, which is how you can shift that heat or that energy yourself without ejaculating it. So get a group of people doing transmutation practices versus normal dudes rubbing it out. And then maybe track these individuals for a long period of time and find out what's the incidence of prostate cancer. My guess is the people doing the transmutation practices who are ejaculating way less frequently have a way lower incidence of prostate inflammation and cancer. That would be my guess. I think that's all I really want to kind of mention, this idea of edging. If there's anything else you kind of want to hear about this particular topic, do feel free to make comments down below the video. It's sort of an interesting topic. To me, like I said, it serves really no benefit other than for you to discover where your edge is. So keep in mind, scale 1 to 10. If you're going to do this, build it to a 7, back off. But again, also keep in mind that if you're doing this every day, it's very addictive behavior. It's very addictive. And actually it will kind of drive you stir crazy. One other thing I did want to mention about it. So nocturnal emissions, right? So this idea of wet dreams. If you're doing a lot of edging and you're not ejaculating, your subconscious is eventually going to make you ejaculate. Again, because you're teasing yourself like crazy, to the point where this may actually disrupt your sleep patterns. And it's also potentially can cause, like I said, the wet dreams or the nocturnal emissions, which then sort of defeats the purpose of doing abstaining from ejaculation in the first place. So with all that said, thank you for watching this video.